Deep Threat Sports Network. We're back at it again with a Week 9 review. Can you believe it? I mean, I had to check with the guys to see if we were really in Week 9. I feel like college football has just zoomed by, and it's just, I mean, it just. I think it's because it's been so exciting. They say good things seem like a very short time when you're having fun. But there's just been a lot of good stuff this weekend. On the other hand, not so much of an exciting weekend. I mean, we were talking about it just now. I mean, we were like, man, I talked it up very highly is what I'm thinking, because I told you guys there was 5 top 25 matchups. There wasn't a whole lot of excitement in the game. I mean, there was no nail biters. There was no games you were like, oh man, I got to lock in. You were just kind of gradually watching every game. But nonetheless, there was still some good stuff that happened. Of course, it's college football, so a couple of teams lost that probably shouldn't have. Teams won that probably shouldn't have. So it's going to be fun. But this week, we're actually only going to do 2 episodes for you guys. Moving forward, we're going to do 2 episodes 1 week, 3 episodes 1 week, and we're going to kind of alternate it that way because we want to make it seem very exciting for you guys. We don't want nothing to get too old, so we're going to always continue to try to mix it up, add a little here and there, and just really give you the best content that we can. But for today's episode, since it is going to be a little different, usually you guys get them in 2 episodes, but today we're going to talk our game review. We're going to talk top 25, and of course, everyone's favorite, the Heisman. And the thing with the Heisman is there's not a whole lot to talk about because it's very, very competitive. But there's three, those three haven't changed much. So while we're at it, Brian, tell me about Dog of the Week. Who do we have for that?
No, we felt like this one was a very easy decision. Even though he wasn't a starter this week, he came in and showed out like he probably should be moving forward. We're going with quarterback Texas A&M, Marcel Reed. Absolutely changed that game. He came in there, I think it was the second quarter. Second quarter? I can't remember off the top of my head.
I think he came in and really made the most impact in the second half, Bryant, to your point
Second
here. I
half.
think they kind of rolled him out to start the second half and just completely changed the landscape of that game.
Yeah, he was running all over LSU's defense. I mean, 3 touchdowns. We'll talk about more of him later, but we thought this was an easy pick. Marcel Reed, Dog of the Week for Deepthreatsportz Network here on the College Football Show.
And after talking about Marcel Reed, 100% clear cut the Dog of the Week, but there's a guy out there that I want to make sure just gets a little bit of credit, and that is Indiana defensive back D'Angelo Ponce. He got a pick six in this game for Indiana when it really wasn't looking too bright for Indiana at that moment, but that pick six really elevated this team. And then another pick later in the game to really suck the life away from Washington. He also had a tackle for loss, 5 total tackles in this game. Just a real impact player for Indiana this week. So definitely not the Dog of the Week, but if we were going to give an award to the defensive player Dog of the Week, I would definitely say D'Angelo Ponce, in my opinion. Also, Dave, real quick, to talk about how you said, that this week wasn't as exciting. It was still an exciting week, right? It's just whenever the first 8 weeks were just arguably the best 8 weeks of college football we've ever seen, it's tough to always live up to those expectations when the bar is so high. The only way you can go is down, it feels like. And man, it was still a really good week of college football.
Hey, Colin may be from Indiana. Last week he wanted to bring up Curtis Rourke for up there. Now this week we got D'Angelo Ponce. Hey, he might be from Indiana. He got something that's missing in Indiana.
Hey, I got that same flu disease you got with Colorado, but I got it for Indiana, man. It's yeah, you find a team and you just gravitate towards them, especially when our home team is Zoo. I swear I wasn't going to bring them up, and this is all I'm saying. Especially when they lay an egg like that, you got to find somebody else to put your eggs in their basket. And I'm all in on Indiana, baby. Let's roll.
No, hey, they're undefeated. They can talk all the smack they want. Can't nobody say nothing until they knock them off. But another team that can talk smack, they're looking like they're gonna get that 12th seed in the playoffs is Boise State. Boise State showed up to play UNLV over the weekend, and it was a very competitive game. I kind of expected this, but it was a very competitive game that Boise State won, and that's including the fact that Ashton Jeanty didn't have a Heisman-like game for the first time in probably 8 weeks. I mean, he wasn't bad, but it wasn't a Heisman performance like he's been doing every week in and week out. So what do you guys take from that game?
In this game, it was quite surprising. Allegiant Stadium has kind of become a tougher place to play than you think it would have been with UNLV actually having a good season this year. Malik Williams has been a great quarterback for them. After Sluka did the whole redshirt NIL negotiation deal from about a month ago, he stepped right in and has probably played just as good, if not better, for this team. And they keyed in on Ashton Genty. I mean, I feel like every team has tried and has failed, and they didn't do a bad job. He averaged less than 4 yards a carry. So they did their best. Like you said, Dave, it wasn't his Heisman performance, but if this was not an Ashton Genty or this was, somebody on Alabama, that would have been a great game. 33 for 128 and touchdown is a good stat line for any running back. But since Genty's been putting up almost 200 and averaging 10 yards a carry, it doesn't seem like the game we've used to for him. But anyway, I thought UNLV played a pretty balanced game. They have 179 yards through the air and 189 yards rushing. They just couldn't get over that second quarter 2-touchdown deal that Boise State had there right before half. Other than that, I thought they played a pretty good game. I thought on the other side of the ball, Boise did what they could, even though Genty was limited on the offensive side of the ball. Madsen, even though he wasn't the best passing, he ran and made plays with his feet. He was averaging almost 20 yards a carry. And their defense played well. They had 6 sacks. They had 9 TFLs and a touchdown. So I think Boise leaned on their defense a little bit in this game. We talked about it in the review or the preview for this week last week. So their defense is not bad. They leaned on this game, did the best they could with the running with Genty, and it panned out for them in the end.
What's crazy about this game, Bryant, is, you brought up a very good point. If this was any other running back in the country with 128 yards and a touchdown, we would be talking about what a fantastic game. And I don't want to take anything away from Genty because he had 128 yards and a touchdown. I mean, kind of like I just said a second ago, when you set the bar so high, there's only one direction you can go. And still a good game from him. Let's not forget he did get injured, it looked like, earlier in the first half of the football game. Kind of went down awkwardly on his wrist or forearm type deal. And you could kind of see for the remainder of the game, he was kind of just, stretching his hand out, throwing it down, trying to work it out. So, I don't know if maybe that slowed him down a little bit. It didn't really look to, because he got right back in the game, I think the next drive or a couple plays later, and still had that same iconic just standing straight up and down, just not really giving the defense a key that he's getting the football. But yes, Brian, you also brought up a great point. UNLV's defensive line did a great job penetrating against this Boise State offensive line, especially early on in the football game. They seemed to be living in the backfield, and they did what other teams try to do, and that is have success slowing down Ashton Genty. They were putting 8 in the box, and they were making Maddox Madsen beat them. And early on, it really looked like Boise State wasn't going to beat them, because Maddox Madsen proved that he could not beat them through the air. But you also brought up a great point. He did seem to be very lethal and effective with his legs in the ground game on this one. And I don't know if that's because the defense was so keyed in on Genty that it allowed Madsen to kind of work his way out slowly and free himself up. So fantastic job by him to really get it done with his legs and help the team out. Also, that Boise State defense, we talked about that in the pregame speeches. They're ferocious, man. I mean, they were leading the country in sacks already. They tacked 6 more on in this football game. Just absolutely lethal by them. And yes, the whole landscape of this game changed as well with the 2 touchdowns in the final 150 of the first half by Boise State. That's when everything completely changed, in my opinion. Boise State also didn't come out in the second half and light the world on fire. They just kind of seemed to coast, and then UNLV worked their way back in, and Boise State just fired right back at them real quick to get some points and kind of secure the bag. But Alex Tubner was everywhere for that Boise State defense in this one, fellas. 14 tackles, 8 of those tackles being solo tackles. Absolute game record, wreaking havoc all over the football field. I'm going to flip over here a little bit and talk about this UNLV offense. Malik Williams is really, really good. I'm willing to say that out loud and put that out there, that I truly think he's a really good quarterback. I mean, I know his stat line through the air wasn't the most impressive with only 179 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. But, fellas, he tacked on 105 yards and a touchdown on the ground. I mean, he proved to really keep a defense off balance, keep them on their heels a little bit, and really prove that this could be a truly balanced offense like you talked about, Brian. UNLV is a lethal team down the stretch for most teams in the country. I just think Boise State is even better than what they're getting credit for. I mean, Dave kind of opened up with the fact that Boise State is looking to get that 12th seed in the playoffs. Man, I think there's a world where they get a better seed than the 12th seed. I really do. I think that they would compete with most Power 4 schools in the country. I'm also willing to say that at this point. I mean, I really do think that their defense can slow a lot of teams down, and I think that their offense with Maddox Matson really showcasing his legs, sprinkle that with Ashton Genty, I think they could have some success. I really do.
I definitely agree with you. Defense travels no matter who you're playing or where you're playing, and they're playing at that level where they can definitely play. It seems like with anybody in the country. And when you have a Heisman type player on the other side of the ball, that could be a recipe for success for a lower. I won't call them a lower team, group of 5 team to compete with these Power 4 schools that we're watching so highly up on the board.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, like I said, there's a case where they get a better seed than a 12 seed. Now, obviously, they have to take care of business the rest of the way. But if
I
Oregon
mean,
wins out and Oregon's the 1 seed and that's their only loss, and it was a low margin loss, dude, they're for real.
yeah, if Madsen can figure it out a little bit better throwing the ball, I mean, this team could be very tough to beat down the stretch here the rest of the season.
To that, Bryant, there was a lot of throws. We were texting early on in this game before it got too late, but there was a lot of throws that looked to be semi-routine throws, especially outside the hash marks. And I'm not talking, deep 20-yard outs. I'm talking, 3 to 7 yard outs that he kind of really struggled putting on the receivers. And early on, I think I might have even texted us in the group and said Boise State's in real trouble here because UNLV was so keyed in on Genty, and rightfully so. And they pretty well said, okay, somebody else is going to beat us in this football game. And if that's what happens, we're okay with it, but it's not going to be Genty.
Mm-hmm.
More consistency from Matson through the air, and they're lethal.
Yep.
Hey, I think there's a world where Boise State might finish out top 10 in the country. How wild would that be? I mean,
to get that top 12 seed, they almost have to be, right? I mean, they have to be higher than 12. I mean, a 29-24 victory over a UNLV football team is nothing to be upset about. UNLV is a very good football team too, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So, I mean, there's a good chance they're going to be a top 10 program. Somebody that isn't, though, is the next team we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Nebraska going to Ohio State and losing to Nebraska. But, not Nebraska. Where am I going with this? They lose to Ohio State, and it was only a four-point game, and it seems that Nebraska just can't close these games. What is the problem? Is it just that you have a young quarterback? Is Dylan Raiola the problem? Is there more to it at Nebraska? Is there shining points for Nebraska?
It's a curse right now, man. Nebraska truly cannot win one possession football game. I don't know what it is. I texted in our group too, and I think you guys both all said the same thing as well. Dude, Nebraska had every chance to win this football game. Matt Rule had every chance to have his biggest win of his Nebraska football career. Could have seriously had a totally different conversation today about this game and talked about how is Ryan Day on his way out because the fans already are pissed off at him every time he loses a football game and want him gone, which I'll be the first to say I think is crazy because, I mean, look at the success he's had outside of against one team. And you tack on a Nebraska loss in the middle of this coming off an Oregon loss and this game being at home, it would have been a different discussion, but it's not now. I mean, he did enough to get the win for Ohio State. I don't think they had a good scheme. I don't think they were truly prepared for how strong of a football team Nebraska was. Let's talk about how fantastic Nebraska's defense was, especially their front seven, man. They held Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson both under 30 yards rushing in this football game. If I would have came on here and you guys didn't know the result of an Ohio State victory 21-17 and I dropped a stat line like that, both of you, rightfully so, would have probably looked at me and been like, you serious? Nebraska won this football game? I mean, that you look at a stat line like that and you truly think that there was no way they won this football game. And let's talk about Will Howard a little bit because in a game where he didn't get much support from the rushing attack like they usually do, he did enough to win, right? And when I say that, I mean he didn't do anything to lose the football game. He took care of the ball for the most part, made the routine throws, didn't have the most impressive stat line. I think he only had 16 total passes in this game, 13 completions, 3 of those being a touchdown, and one of those, being an interception to Malcolm Hartzog on Nebraska's secondary, which we've talked about on this show too. We have brought him up before. He is a very, very good defensive back, and that was a really impactful interception for Nebraska at that point, and really gave them another chance to go win the football game, and they did nothing with it. So there was so many chances for Nebraska in this, but yeah, back to Will Howard. He did enough. He did enough. I just find it so hard to believe that we're sitting here talking about how both running backs had under 30 yards and Will Howard only had 13 completions, and they still won this football game. And that is crazy to me that they got it done like that. Nebraska's offense, not good right now at all. Dylan Raiola right now, not good, in my opinion, at all. And let me preface this. He's a true freshman. And this is a game at Ohio State, obviously the biggest game of his young career. So, I mean, this is, in my opinion, kind of fully expected. I think it just sheds more light on it, how bad he played, because they could have won the game. I mean, it was 152 yards on 30-plus attempts and no touchdowns, fellas. That's not good. I mean, you got to build off that in a strong, strong way.
Yeah, I definitely think this was a Big Ten defensive battle like we're typically used to seeing in this conference. Both teams stopped the run, and they put it on the offensive quarterbacks to win the game through the air. And truly, like you mentioned with Will Howard, he didn't have a spectacular game as far as stats-wise, but there was really two plays, I think, that was the deciding factor in this game. It was a 60-yard pass and a 40-yard pass to Smith and Tate there on offense. I think other than that, he would have had hardly any passing yards, and that really broke open the game and gave him momentum on those drives to go down and score. Another point I want to bring up, and we kind of talked about it through the text on Saturday, was Ohio State is majorly banged up on the offensive line now. I think it showed for sure in this game how they could not run the ball. And now they have two starting tackles out. One got injured in this game, and they had one out previously before. That's going to be a big, big factor for them moving forward, because Ohio State is always a very balanced offense, run to pass, play action type stuff. And it's going to be tough to do that with some backup offensive linemen. Now, they probably have 5 stars waiting in the wings, but you never know. Those guys, even though they're highly ranked, can come in and kind of have some butterflies and not play as well. So that's going to be something to watch down the stretch for sure.
So talking about that, Bryant, there was 20 tackles for loss in this football game. I mean,
exactly to my point.
I mean, that just solidifies your point even more. I think Ohio State is now on their third offensive tackle. Not great, especially when you have expectations to not just make the playoff, but to win a national championship this year at Ohio State. So since we're not really diving into, our conference talks this week and remaining schedules, let me ask you guys a question, because I think I was the only one on our network, and I'm not saying I'm right. I mean, we have a lot of football lists, and they may win out. I'm just trying to see how you guys feel after a football game like this. I think Ohio State's toughest games are ahead of them at this point. I mean, they have at Penn State versus Indiana, who, in my opinion, is extremely, extremely good. Dave was talking earlier, and I guess I'm glazing Indiana at this point, and I'll continue to, because somebody's going to have to prove me wrong otherwise. And they also play Michigan. Now, we talked about how Michigan is horrendous on offense. I think that Michigan-Ohio State game could probably look very similar to how this game looked. But do you guys still feel good about Ohio State winning out? I mean, I think their talent is superior to all three of those teams. But, fellas, if Nebraska can generate some pressure, I'll be the first to tell you right now, Indiana, Michigan, and Penn State can all generate some pressure as well.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it earlier in the weekend, how as it opens now, and maybe changed since then, but they're actually the favorite against Penn State. It's minimal, but I think that's probably their toughest game. And Indiana's not going to be easy either, even though I don't know if Rourke's going to be back for that game or not, but their backup played last week was to play just as well. So that's going to be tough. Looking at the schedule even a few weeks ago, we're like, this – once they get past Oregon, after that, it's not so bad, just maybe Penn State. But that Michigan game is always close, no matter how good or bad either team is. Like you mentioned, Indiana is firing all cylinders right now. And I think you can make arguments that Penn State may be the best team in the country right now. So I agree with you. I think their hardest three games probably.
Penn State is not the best team in the country.
Davis such a Penn State hater. Davis such a Penn State hater. I want Penn State to beat Ohio State by 50 now, because Dave hates Penn State so much.
I am a big hater of Penn State. I don't think they're that good.
Well,
they haven't
we'll get there. We'll get there. You save it. But Brian, to your point,
I agree with you. I think their toughest three games are ahead.
Yes, and I want to say this. Taven Jackson, Indiana's backup, in my opinion, fellas, that Indiana offense with him was better than Nebraska's offense with their starting quarterback and Dylan Raiola, even if Rourke is not back for Indiana. Their backup quarterback runs a better offense at Indiana than what Nebraska does with their starter, I guess is what I'm trying to say for more clarity here. And I think if Rourke's back, I think it makes Indiana even that much better. I mean, you guys know I was all over him to, make a Heisman push before he got injured, but also talking about the Penn State game and Dave hating on Penn State. I mean, Drew Aller got hurt this last week. We'll talk about that game in a little bit. I don't want to give too much away, but that also could help Ohio State. I don't think Drew Aller's injury is going to be too significant, but also let's notice that Penn State's backup that came in took care of business as well. So I think Ohio State is on the ropes this coming week. I think Ryan Day is I not getting nervous, but I mean you could feel and see just the tension through the TV that Ryan Day was going through in that football game. I mean, there was some significant anxiety from him, I guess you could say.
I just feel like their whole team is reeling as a whole right now. Just after that tough loss against Oregon, they were kind of coming out slow in this game and barely won. So I think they're all kind of like, oh, this isn't what we're used to type thing.
Hey, I just think that if Indiana today played against Penn State, Indiana would beat Penn State, and I'm comfortable saying that. That's just my point. I don't think Penn State is bad, but they've just done what they've had to do to remain undefeated. Like, they haven't wowed me at any point. They haven't really played anybody, and it's kind of like with Indiana, like, no one was giving them any credit until they really started proving themselves, which is kind of where we're at now, where they're really proving themselves. And I think, like you guys said, these next couple games for Penn State is really going to show their true colors. But I don't think at this point they should be a top 4 program. But we're going to get to that because we're going to hit our top 25. But another game that is, well, it's not really relevant to top 25 because, hey, it's coming from the state of Kansas. No offense to the state of Kansas. But Kansas and Kansas State battled it out. It seemed like there was no defense going on. Kansas State ends up getting the W. But man, there's Kansas and Kansas State that, Kansas State's good. Kansas State is good. I think they got good stuff going for them. I know, Colin, you're huge on Kansas State. But Kansas, what's going on with Kansas? Like, why can they not get it going? What's going on there? Is it coaching staff? Is it players? I mean, I don't blame somebody if they don't want to go to Kansas, but hey, I bet somebody's got some money there.
I don't know. Honestly, I don't think they just have underperformed this season. I think this performance you saw from Kansas last week against K-State was the team we kind of expected to be like that all season. I mean, Jalen Daniels is a pretty good quarterback. I mean, they upset some big-time teams last year at Oklahoma and almost beat Texas too. And Devin Neal as well. I mean, these are supposed to be their playmakers. They've just been not there since, they lost the first few games, week 2 and 3. In this game, there was zero defense. K-State had 479 yards. It was just kind of who was going to have the ball last and score and win type game. Big time field goal there at the end by K-State's kicker to kind of seal the deal there late in overtime. Yeah, like I mentioned, there was just no defense play in this game. K-State had 479 yards. Avery Johnson played like he typically did, making plays with his feet and through the air, passing it. Giddens played very well. I mean, he was the X factor, had almost 100 yards. So, Colin, I don't know what you think, but like I mentioned earlier, this was kind of a who has the ball last type of game.
This is a tough diagnosis for me because I had a lot of emotions in watching this football game because I think K-State played down and I think Kansas played at their absolute peak for this season. I think Kansas came out and played the absolute best football Kansas could play this season. And kind of going into this, I can't say I expected that because we all talked about how we loved Kansas State -9, -10, and I still would. I would take it again tomorrow because they are a 10-point better football team than Kansas. Kansas just played out of their mind. And to your point, Brian, this is the Devin Neal and the Jalen Daniels that the Kansas fans, the Kansas coaching staff expected to see all season long. And they really came out and shined in this football game. Jalen Daniels is lethal outside of the pocket. He's lethal on the run. He's never healthy, it seems like, but when he is a very good quarterback, and he showed that in this football game, I thought. I mean, I think this was maybe not statistically or on paper his best game of the season, but this was his best game of the season. Now, on the flip side of this, Kansas State's offense to me at times just looked extremely stale. And Dave, you're right. I am all over Kansas State. I've been all over Kansas State. I've been all over Avery Johnson. And I don't want to overreact here, but they really disappointed me in this football game, I think, for many reasons. You're at the very end of this football game, and Avery Johnson misses a wide open touchdown. And then at the very next play, they have a drop touchdown in the end zone to a wide open. I think it was a tight end, maybe a receiver, but I'm pretty sure tight end gets loose in the middle of the end zone to really make this an untouchable football game, to give Kansas the ball back with really no time and down 2 possessions. And they drop it and they miss it. So, I mean, this is just a lot of really dumb stuff. Kansas State got away with this one, in my opinion. There was many a times I thought Kansas State was going to lose this one. They were up, I think, 7 to 10 points at one point in time. Let Kansas come back, take a lead. And it came down to field goals and Kansas State just not looking the best. So, where Kansas State goes from here, they're playing with fire right now, and they did get out of a rivalry game with the 2-point victory. 29-27 is nothing to hang your hat on against a not very good Kansas football team. But one guy I want to talk about with Kansas, too, that doesn't get much credit is the fact that Luke Grimm, and most of you probably don't even know who Luke Grimm is. I think it was number 11 for Kansas.
I was trying to figure out who he was.
Yes, he's a receiver. That guy was – the fact that he had under 70 yards is beyond me, because I feel like every time I looked up, this guy was getting loose and doing something spectacular. And, the fact that those were his numbers, I was really shocked by. But let's also point out the fact that Kansas could have went up 14-0 in this football game. They dropped an absolute bomb down the field that Jalen Daniels threw in stride to a receiver, and he just dropped it, and it resulted in a punt and no points on that drive. So just really, really an awkward football game, I thought. Neither team impressed me. Let me take that back. Kansas did impress me because it was Kansas's best game, but neither team as a whole, if you're looking at them from a whole as a football team, impressed me. And Kansas State needs to stop this bullshit and just go out and take care of business, or they're not going to find themselves there in the end.
Yeah, it didn't seem like K-State had almost 500 yards of offense in this game because of how just the back and forth. But I agree. I think Kansas kind of had this one circled midway through the season after they didn't go as planned. Like, this is our game. We're going to throw it all out in the field. And I think Lance Leipold kind of, the Kansas head coach, kind of mentioned that during this week, that this is a big rivalry. We're going to go into their place and give us the best shot. And they definitely did. K-State has been kind of up and down this season. They've had some close games. They had a mega loss to BYU. But yeah, they just got to try to be more consistent. They're too up and down.
Well, and what was crazy too is I don't know if many people out there remember this play because it kind of goes unrecognized. So Kansas lost by 2, and K-State tied the game because Kansas freshman returner stepped out at the 1-yard line, and the very next play was a safety.
Yeah.
So I mean, that looms huge in a game where you lost by 2. That is the game-altering play, in my opinion. There was many things you can look back on for Kansas where they should have won this game. You eliminate the safety, you catch the wide open touchdown down the middle of the field to go up big, 14-0. So I mean, Kansas really did lose this football game. I don't think Kansas State won it. If that makes any sense. That's the way I felt when the game was over. I was like, Jesus Christ, man. If I'm a K-State fan, I'm thanking the football gods because we got away with one here.
No, absolutely. I mean, that was one of those games. I get what you're talking about, where Kansas State didn't do anything to win it. It just so happened that Kansas let them have it, and that's just what happened. But I'll tell you what, a game that was on very different, very exciting game.
Hey, Dave, speaking of a team that let a team have it.
Yeah, exactly. You guys know about that, right? But next game we're going to talk about is LSU playing Texas A&M.
Hey, stop for a second. You're such a
Dave.
dickhead. Get off the Mizzou hate, dude. We know we lost. We don't need a reminder. We're not talking about it on this episode, Dave.
Hey, I got to get you guys fired up. Got to get you guys ready. The people like you guys.
God.
About to log off.
But so that was an exciting game. LSU, A&M. A&M's a great program. I mean, which is why, they did what they did, and why they did what they did to LSU, which is not, something we expected, A&M to put up 38 points. And all that came as a result of benching the quarterback. How many times have we seen people get benched this year? But man, it worked out great for Texas A&M. Marcel Reed was just an animal. I mean, he was just like playing neighborhood football. Like he was having a good time. He was running the ball, being smart. He just looked like he's the guy.
Dude, job. Marcel Reed won this football game single-handedly for A&M, and that's why he was our dog of the week. He had 2 passes. He was 2 for 2
for 70 yards, right? I think it was like for like 70 yards.
Won the football game with that. Let that sink in. I mean, the guy is a stud. I mean, this is he brought a completely different dynamic to this A&M offense, and that's exactly what A&M needed. Mike Elko looks like an absolute genius at this point in the season. Mike Elko is coach of the year in my opinion. I mean, he's really brought this A&M program to life. When for many years now, when Jimbo was running it, we kept saying, "Oh, they're going to be good." Well, they're not. They're going to be good. Well, they're not. And Mike Elko comes year 1. They're going to be good. They had lower expectations than they've had the last couple of years, and they're better than they have been the last couple of years. And I think A&M is truly off to the races. I think they are a SEC conference frontrunner at this point. And I think here on this network, we got out ahead of that pretty early compared to most people out there. We were all over that A&M could win the conference very, very early. But this was really a tale of 2 halves, I thought. You know, LSU looked to come out, handle business. Nussmeier looked to come out, handle business. And you kind of heard it at the start of the second half. You hear the reporters, the announcers all talking about how Brian Kelly's saying, "Hey, don't give in. Don't lose this football game. Keep your foot on the gas. Keep scoring points. Don't get complacent." And LSU did the exact opposite of what Brian Kelly was telling them to do. They got complacent. They didn't really look the same no more. Nussmeier ended up throwing 3 interceptions and looked absolutely horrible. I've talked about him on this network that he could be a Heisman winner. And I'm here to tell you, after a game like that, there's 0% chance he has a chance at the Heisman. He looked like dog shit. I mean, we're talking 3 and 4 and 5 yard passes that he was throwing interceptions on. Was seeing ghost in the second half of this football game, and it looked to me like he was under pressure even when he wasn't under pressure. Mm-hmm. Like I know there was a lot of constant pressure, and I think maybe that's why he was so off balance and just looked so uncomfortable all the time, because he was just assuming he was going to be under pressure, even though when he wasn't. Like that last interception, when he flipped it to the running back right there over the middle of the field, not even seeing, you know, the outside linebacker or the end, whoever slipped back into coverage right there. That was just awful. That's just awful football. Not good at all. But A&M's rushing attack was really good in this football game, boys. 242 yards. Amari Daniels, 12 for 91. Le'Veon Moss, 14 for 83 and 2 touchdowns. Marcel Reed, 9 for 62 and 3 touchdowns. Just ran it right down LSU's throat. And I got a chuckle out of that, you know, because all the announcers early on were talking about how Blake Baker this, Blake Baker that, slips over there from Missouri as a defensive coordinator. And I'll give him that. Looked like a genius in the first half. I think I might have even texted you guys and said, "Good for Blake Baker."
You did. You definitely texted that because I was like, "Wait, hold on, something's not matching up."
And then the second half, everything changed because he had 0 answer from Marcel Reed, and you could tell he had no answer from Marcel Reed. They would pan over to him on the camera, standing next to Brian Kelly, and Brian Kelly's in his ear like, "Hey man, figure it out. Stop this offense before it gets too late." And it just got too late. So I had the last laugh in the end. He can kiss my ass. You know, I hate to sound like that, but whatever, man. He is a great defensive coordinator. I'm not trying to say he's not, but I did get a chuckle out of that, especially when the day wasn't great for Bryant and I. But Bryant, I mean, how did you feel about this game? I mean, it was kind of an ugly game, I thought, right?
Yeah, in a way. Personally, I thought this was kind of the opposite of how, not taking it back to a few weeks ago, but you know, remember when Mizzou played Texas A&M and Wigman was hurt, and everybody thought it was going to be Marcel Reed, the quarterback. I think it was like the opposite of that for LSU. Even though there was no concern there, they didn't prepare at all for Marcel Reed and be prepared for that rushing attack that he could bring if Wigman didn't play as well, and it showed. Wigman struggled in the first half, and they took him out, and they brought in Marcel Reed, and it was basically game over from that point, even though LSU was winning by over 10 points at that time. Like you mentioned earlier, Marcel Reed only had 2 passes and had 3 touchdowns, 242 yards on the ground. They couldn't do anything defensively to stop him, and they looked befuddled. And then, you know, I don't think absolutely Nussmeier can handle pressure that well as of what we've seen recently, and especially in this game. like you mentioned, it seemed like he had pressure even there when there wasn't. I don't know if he was expecting it based on what he was seeing pre-snap, but he had happy feet almost the entire last 3 quarters of this game, and that's pretty much what caused him all those interceptions. Was he was just making bad decisions because he thought he was about to get hit.
Why, Bryant? Why did they not run the football more? And when I say they, LSU, why did LSU not run the football more to take a little bit of pressure off Nussmeier? I mean, because to your point, he was absolutely reeling, dude. He was melting. I mean, he was completely melting from top down. And at some point, you have to help him, and they did not help him. They just sent his ass right back out there and taking shot after shot after shot. And that can go two ways. I'm talking shots down the field and shots in the backfield. I mean, this was just not good. Poor coaching.
I feel like I was just about to say, I always feel like Brian Kelly, when he was at Notre Dame, if they get down, even more than probably like 10 points, he seems like, oh, we got to pass, 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 even though you still have to kind of stick to the game plan and try to get yourself back into the game. Yeah, the clock will be running, but at that point, Texas A&M's defensive front was just pinning their ears back and not even worrying about, getting off tackles and blocks and trying to stop the running game because they were just not doing it. So, and I feel like he's always been like that. So maybe moving forward, they can kind of see what happened here in the second half and try to build off that and say, hey, we got to actually keep running the ball, even though it may not be going our way. Because I'd really truly still think that LSU could definitely make the playoff, even after this game. They have some winnable games down the stretch, but they're going to have to play perfect football from now on and build on the mistakes they've made.
Definitely a case to be made that they can. I do agree with you on that. But just LSU just got completely outcoached. What this boils down to: the second half adjustments from Bryant Collin and Texas A&M's offense, and the second half adjustments from Mike Elko, who I do believe is probably the ringleader still on that as the defensive coach, even though he's not the defensive coordinator and he's the head coach, but a great defensive mind. And I'm sure he had all the coaching staff rallied around him to motivate that defense because they completely eliminated the middle of the field for the second half in Garrett Nussmeier and made him throw outside the hashes, and that's what made it extremely, extremely tough. Brian Kelly just got out-coached again. I think Brian Kelly's a great coach, but there are many times, to your point, Brian, where you see Brian Kelly just kind of lose it and start blaming his quarterbacks and his players and his other coaches and just kind of melt down and get out-coached, and that's exactly what happened here.
Yeah, he seems like he gets caught in the moment of the game all too often and starts pointing fingers rather than bearing down and try to figure out what we can do to win the game. Even though they're down. And he's a good coach, pregame and planning for a team before they start playing, but it seems like shit all goes to the wind and he kind of throws his clipboard down and starts just, ranting and raving and acting like Nick Saban out there yelling at people, all the time. And yeah, he needs to figure it out, and this LSU team needs to figure it out as well if they want to actually get where they plan on going in the season.
Well, let me ask you guys, because I feel like we've talked about this. This is the first time we've talked about a team not preparing for somebody. You're making six figures as a football coach at a program. Yes, it is a lot of work. It is a lot of effort. But you're getting paid six figures. You better be prepared for the starter and the backup. You got
I agree, dude.
Absolutely.
Like, I just don't understand why.
Well, especially when their backup has played this much. Especially when as a coach, and at least I feel like you should know as a coach that, hey, if we do get in this football game against A&M and we are dominating, we have seen both quarterbacks play for Texas A&M. I feel like we should have a script ready to go for if this guy does come in because they're such different quarterbacks. And I guess that leads me to my next question that we have to talk about before we get off this game. Who are you guys going with the remainder of the season? You going with Wegman or are you going with Marcel Reed?
I think it's got to be Marcel Reed. He hasn't played bad. Like, when he's played, he hasn't played bad. Connor Wegman, I don't think he's bad either, but he's just not the answer.
I don't know. I think it kind of depends on what team you're playing. I think it kind of depends on defensive strengths of the team you're playing that week. Personally, I'd roll with Reed. He's obviously better on his feet rushing the ball, but I do think Wegman is a little bit better of a passer. But Reed is more than capable of doing that too. So I think you got to roll with the hot hand moving forward, unless it's a team that can absolutely stop the run no matter who it is type team. Then I think you have to roll with him, with Marcel.
I'm rolling with Marcel Reed, and I was rolling with Marcel Reed coming into that Mizzou game, and we looked really dumb here talking about that, I guess, because Wegman had a Heisman type game, but we haven't seen Wegman do that since. Wegman didn't do it before that. Wegman hasn't done it after that. Wegman didn't do it last season. Wegman didn't do it, prior to that. I mean, I think it's time we have the conversation that maybe Wegman's honestly just an average power four quarterback at best. And Marcel Reed, it brings a different dynamic. And for me, the one thing that I found a little strange, and maybe not strange, but just kind of gave me the answer to that question that I needed, fellas, this team completely rallied around Marcel Reed too. They looked like it lit a fire for them. They looked like, they want to play maybe for Marcel Reed more than they want to play for Wegman. And that's just an assumption I'm making. Obviously, I'm not in that locker room, but that's the vibe I got.
Did you guys see when Connor Raven came off? Like, I mean, and I get it, like, yeah, you're upset, but like, man, he was not happy at all. Like, he was very upset when this conversation happened because they showed the camera, and I'm like, yeah, but like for me, we've all played sports. Like, man, like for me, it's like if I'm not playing good and I'm hurting the team, and there's a way for us to win this game, put the other guy in. Like, it's as simple as that. Like, we all know when we're not playing well. Like, you're not like.
I think at that point though, Dave, I kind of understood Wegman a little bit because their offensive attack, period, just doesn't work. But outside of him, even just wasn't working. I mean, I thought that I thought LSU at that point. I talked about Blake Baker earlier. I thought LSU at that point really had a great game plan and great attack for Connor Wegman. So I mean, I get his frustrations 100%. I mean, but Marcel Reed's just a better quarterback. I think that's what this boils down to. He's just a better quarterback.
Yeah, that's a very tough spot to be in, is team or personal pride. And I think a lot of us have probably been in that situation that have played sports, and it's a very tough thing to make. But I think ultimately at the end, you got to be the best team player you can and do it the best you can for your team, not yourself in that situation. And I think at the end of the game, he realized that when it's all good, Marcel was playing. So we'll see what they do moving forward.
Hey, this is coming from All-State Bryant Bessel. That's all. I'm just put that out there.
Hey, I just want to premise that I was not playing like Class 6 schools. Yeah, it's football, but we were playing Class 1 in Missouri. So I'm not some five-star athlete out here on the field.
All I've been hearing.
Hey, man, still a dog.
And I was surrounded by a lot of good players. It wasn't just me.
Look at this. See, Bryant was that team first guy. Listen to it.
Humble guy.
Hey, your Colorado players should take a page out of Bryant's book, Dave.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, man. But let's talk about another game because I want to hear – there's going to be a lot of conversation on this game. We should have made it one of the main games. Penn State at Wisconsin. Penn State barely gets through Wisconsin. Let's talk about
Stop. I am already tired of hearing you talk about this, and you talk about it for 10 seconds. Dave, Penn State wins this game by 2+ touchdowns with their backup quarterback. Why are you hating on Penn State so much? I don't get it.
They don't have any good wins. They don't have any good wins.
This up. Don't have any good wins. They beat the absolute brakes off an Illinois team. I mean, Illinois, I'm not saying Illinois is a top 10 world beater team, but there's a lot of teams out there that would struggle with Illinois. There's a lot of teams out there that struggle with USC. There's a lot of teams out there that struggle with Wisconsin right now. You got to come to your senses, son. I'm coming to my senses for you on Travis Hunter in Colorado. It's time you come to your senses on Penn State. But to your point, there was a point in time when Wisconsin looked like they may be able to get this done, but they didn't. Penn State goes out, gets a pick six when it looked like they were reeling, and that was huge for them. Really lit a fire. We talked about Drew Allar getting hurt in this football game. I don't think it's significant. I could be wrong. I'm not in that locker room. I'm not their trainer. But to me, it didn't look too significant. It looked like he was still moving around, and all the extremities looked pretty good. On the sidelines, didn't really see anything significant at that point. Bo Primula, I don't even know how to say his name really. I mean, I know he's a stud. I sometimes struggle with names, and I'm just going to call him Bo P here. But Bo P looked really, really good and looked like a very serviceable backup, and we talked about that on this network. Just like the last game with A&M. It's good to have a good, reliable backup quarterback. We've seen teams out there, not going to mention who don't have good, reliable backups, and things don't go well for them when the starter's not in the game. And you see Bo P come in this game, take care of business, get the win, and that's exactly what he needed to do against Wisconsin. I know we don't want to spend too much time on these, these 4 games that we're talking about here, but I want to talk about one thing before I get off here with Wisconsin. Did you guys see how nuts that place went when they played jump around? I loved it. That is one of the best environments in college football when jump around comes on. The cameras were shaking. You could tell the stands were shaking. The announcers were talking about how the stands were shaking. That's really cool shit. Love to see a good fan base like that.
Man. Yeah, I mean, that's what you love.
28-13, Dave, zip it. 28-13, Penn State went with the backup quarterback, zip it.
Hey,
Yeah,
and it's gonna. I just want to add one thing. That Penn State defense is going to be impossible to score points on, no matter who's playing against them.
I mean, Wisconsin just hasn't played anybody. But anyways, let's get on to another game that was a lot more competitive than we expected. Texas at Vanderbilt. My guy Diego Pavia was close. They're just on that brink, and they just can't seem to click everything right. But then they played a pretty good Texas team. But what did you guys see? I mean, what did you guys see at the quarterback position? How's that going out for Texas?
Honestly, it looked like Texas was going to run away with this game pretty easily there in the first half. They were just absolutely gashing Vandy through the air. But we saw in the second half, Vandy made some adjustments on defense, and they held Texas to less than 14 points in the second half and almost came back and won. Kind of turned into a defensive battle there in the second half. Vandy did all they could, but with time running out there in mid to late fourth quarter, they kind of had to move away from their, the multi-option rushing thing they do where either Diego can pass or hand it off or run the ball, and they went strictly pass. And that Vandy offensive line could not hold up, every play with that Texas defensive line. And Diego got, especially on the last interception, got pressured and threw the ball to Texas for 2 interceptions there late. So that was kind of the game. Vandy played well. They tried. They almost pulled off another massive upset at home. That'd have been insane. There have been another goalpost in the river down there in Nashville. But Texas did what they had to do and came out with a win against a top 25 team on the road. So props to them.
Dude, if Vandy could have beat Texas and Alabama at home in the same year, the Cumberland River would have been backfilling into other states. I mean, that would have been they would have been out of goalposts to put up at Vandy.
You don't even play anymore. Just call it a season at that point.
Yes. Wrap it up, boy. We don't need no more. These were our national championships. We're hanging our hats. We're done. But yeah, Dave, go ahead.
Do you guys know? I haven't looked into it. Is Diego Pavia? Does he have any more eligibility after the season?
Oh, that's a good question.
I haven't looked, Bryant, and I'll look right now. But off the cuffs, I think he's done. He's been around for a while.
I was going to say,
he was at that academy, and then he went to
New Mexico State.
Was it New Mexico State or New Mexico? Yeah. New Mexico State. I think he might be done. I know he's gonna have that COVID year in there if he wants it, but I think he's done.
Either way, he's going to be either, if he has more eligibility, he's going to be probably a top. Either he stays at Vandy. I don't know if he does. He seems like a pretty loyal player, but there's going to be some big time schools coming to Vandy and try to kick him off. If he has,
unfortunately, he's done.
He's done.
I just saw he's done.
My other point. So scratch that. I seriously do think Diego Pavia is going to get some noise in the NFL draft. Personally.
Oh man, I say he's one of those players where you don't get him in first, second, third round, but maybe
I don't. I think he goes undrafted. I think he can make it. You know who he reminds me of, Brian? I know you're a big NFL guy and you lead our NFL shows too. You know who he reminds? Taysom Hill. He kind of gives me like Taysom Hill type vibes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could kind of have a role like that where you kind of see him play a tight end spot a little bit, or you kind of slot him out and maybe throw him a backwards pass and let him sling one down the field. Or if your quarterback gets injured and you got some depth chart concerns at that position, you throw him in for a couple games and say, hey, man, show us what you got. So he really gives me Taysom Hill vibes. And I do agree. I think he can find his way to an NFL roster. But I drafted, and he's just –
I don't think he's going to be like, day 2 or day 1 or anything like that. But he went from actually off the map to, I think he definitely makes a team and could probably make some noise, at some point on maybe not the quarterback position, but like you mentioned, like a Taysom Hill type player. But just want to throw that in there.
I think he's a player that you're not upset to pay him a league minimum salary and just let him sit on the team. And I think any team that has the ability to pick him up in those later rounds, why not? Like, let's be real.
I'll tell you right now, he's better than a lot of quarterbacks we see make rosters.
Absolutely.
I mean, good Lord.
Oh man. Well, let's talk about another game. SMU at Duke. My Duke Blue Devils are making some noise on the football field, not just the basketball court. So they didn't get the dub, but hey, they showed up to play and they gave SMU a time. Colin, talk to me about that game. How did you see that game?
Well, I'm going to lead this off with Rhett Lashley for SMU and Manny Diaz for Duke doing fantastic things at those two programs right now. Both of those teams, I think, were 6-1 coming into this football game. Just a fantastic job by both of them. I think they're both, really good football teams. I think Duke was better than I thought they were. But I want to talk about how SMU had a 21-7 lead and absolutely blew this. They absolutely fell apart. On this network, we had SMU -11, I believe, or maybe -12 going into the weekend and was very comfortable with that. And at 21-7, it looked like it was going to be sweat-free. It looked like SMU was going to grow this lead. And, man, Duke just hung around. Duke just kept making play after play. The defense was really stepping up. If Duke doesn't go 0 for 2 on field goals and a missed extra point, they would have won this football game in regulation. You see Duke drive the field. Credit to Malik Murphy. He leads them on a drive down the field to give them a chance to win it with the field goal, and somehow SMU gets through again and blocks it. So, I mean, this was just unbelievable stuff from SMU special teams. That's why they ended up winning this football game. Then it goes to overtime. You see SMU drive and score, and then you see Duke score. I think it was on the very first play. I think Duke comes out and Malik Murphy throws a strike down the left side of the field, back of the end zone, and they score. And I was like, holy shit. And in that moment, I was sitting on the couch by myself, and I love Manny Diaz's call to go for 2. You had all the momentum. You had SMU on their heels. You've missed two field goals and an extra point. You're going for 2. And when he kept them on the field, I was like, this is a great call. SMU just lost. I truly thought Duke would go win it. I think their play call on the 2-point conversion was horrible. I think the call to go for it was fantastic. And if you let, Dave, I don't know what you would have drawn up there, but I think if you would have let Bryant or I drop a play right there with Malik Murphy, I think we find the end zone. I really do. I don't love that play call at all, but I love the decision to go for it. And, man, Duke just came up 1 point short in overtime. So credit to SMU to go ahead and get it done with 28-27 victory and make that stand on the 2-yard line to win the game. So SMU turned the page, got a dub against a good Duke football team that was better than I thought they were.
Man, it sounds like the ACC's getting kind of competitive over there.
ACC's fun, man. ACC is fun this year. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I feel like you hear Duke, you always think basketball. You don't think Duke football. And
no.
And things may be getting better in that department. Hey,
it's been pretty good the past 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike Elko, baby. Mike Elko.
Yep.
Hey, Duke athletic department knows how to hire. Let me tell you.
They know. And Manny Diaz is a really good coach. I think he was the defensive coordinator at Penn State last year, if I recall correctly. Yep. So I mean, he knows how to win and coach and win football games.
Also at Miami, right?
Yeah, he was their previous head coach before Cristobal, so he knows the conference and how to approach football games in there.
Man,
yeah, and honestly, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say he's a better football coach than Mario Cristobal, just not as good of a recruiter as Mario Cristobal.
Hey, these days, all you need to do is recruit. You got to get
have good coordinators and recruit, and you'll win football games.
And make sure your alumni give money back to the school. Get the NIL going.
Okay, we don't need to bring this up, Dave.
Hey,
yeah, move on, Dave.
I know what you're hinting at.
Yeah, we get we're picking up on your subtle bullshit.
All right, well, let's talk about Illinois at Oregon. Oregon Ducks just flying through everybody. Dylan Gabriel's a stud. I mean, he's probably going to win the Heisman. Let's talk about it, boys. Bryant, you talk to me about it so you can talk about something else.
So we talked about this in the preview this week. We thought Oregon had, a solid upper hand in this game, but not 38-9. I mean, it was complete domination on both sides of the football. Oregon had 527 yards of offense. They held Illinois in check all game. Luke Altmaier, the quarterback for Illinois, had 2 picks and a QBR of 17, which is atrocious. So many playmakers on this Oregon team: Tez Johnson, Dylan Gabriel, running back Jordan James. I mean, they have so many options. And I think there was like 9 receivers who had a reception of multiple yards in this game. So nobody knows who to cover when they're playing them on the offensive side of the ball. So complete domination this game in Eugene, and Illinois is going to be reeling from this one. I thought Illinois is a decent football team. They have some good players on both sides of the ball as well, but they ran into a buzzsaw there in Eugene, I thought, on Saturday.
Yeah, I thought, and we talked about it here, and we talked about how we liked it. I thought Illinois could cover, but man, they just credit to Oregon. They are a team that's taking care of business when they need to take care of business. So I mean, they're a damn good football team, and without question, in my opinion, the #1 football team in college football this year. Hey, Dave. Now that we're gonna dive into our Heisman, though, let's not spend too much time on it, just because and we look at our list here, and this is the first time I'm seeing y'all's actual picks. I just kind of assumed that we were all going to be on the same page, and we are. So let's just talk about how we all have Ashton Jeanty, Cam Ward, and Dylan Gabriel in our top 3, and let's kind of make a case for what these 3 have to do moving forward to win it, rather than talking so much about them, like what they've done so far. I'll quickly read off stats for you guys. Ashton Jeanty with 1,376 yards on the ground, 18 touchdowns. One thing I want to highlight is he has no fumbles. Very impressive. Very, very impressive, because defenses are keying in on him. Dylan Gabriel on this season, having a very good year with 2,371 yards, 18 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Cam Ward on the season with 2,746 yards, 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. So, Bryant, real quick, I'm going to kick it to you first. What does Cam Ward have to do in your eyes the remainder of the season to kind of win this thing?
I think we've seen him, and especially in that last game last week, or not this previous week, the week before last against Louisville. If he can come out and can show how dominant he is, both through the air and making plays with his feet, and consistently putting together drive after drive, I think he definitely has to continue doing that. But I think another point that he has to continue and probably do better than he has this season is Miami's been in a lot of games they probably shouldn't have been, that were tight, like Cal, for instance. The Virginia Tech game earlier in the season that they probably should have lost. If they can avoid those type games and he plays to the level he's been playing at, I definitely think he has a for sure chance of being invited and possibly win.
So, Dave, I know you kind of talked a little bit about how, he didn't have the best stat line against FSU this weekend. Do you think that I know obviously to help his Heisman campaign, he probably should have had better numbers than what he did, but I think he didn't really have to, right? I mean, I think they probably just told him, hey man, don't take many hits, stay healthy, stay on your feet, just make the routine completions, and we're going to win this football game, with ease, really. And I thought they kind of did. So, I mean, what are you seeing, Dave? I mean, I know you kind of talked about that a little bit.
I think for me, like, yeah, I get your point where, like, is it worth getting hurt to play FSU? But at the same time, like, I feel like in my eyes, I'm thinking like, oh, then you don't trust your quarterback to make those hard throws, and not get hurt. You're kind of like, oh, like, let's not get hurt. And yes, I get it. There's a lot of injuries going on, but at the end of the day, if you're a Heisman player, you got to have Heisman moments, kind of like Ashton Jeanty over the weekend. I mean, he didn't even have a Heisman moment, but even his numbers on any other running back, you're like, man, he had a good day.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's his bad
exactly.
day. The average running back's good day is Ashton Jeanty's bad day. And I think regardless, Cam Ward, you just have to show up. I mean, he had 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions against a 1-7 FSU. I mean,
But hey, he took care of the ball though. That like, to me, that is what stood out. Like, that's kind of what I was getting at. I mean, you see the rushing attack from Miami really work in this football game, and I truly do think if we would have had a microphone in that locker room, or planted a bug where we could hear what they were talking about, I am very confident they told Cam Ward, we're not going to get you hurt in this football game. We're not going to allow you to take as many hits as what you would in a high level situation. And they just let the running backs take over, man. Damian Martinez snapped a big one off too to really cap things off. I was really impressed with what Miami had to show outside of Cam Ward in this passing attack. In my opinion, I thought this was big for them.
I think for me that shows a lot for Miami because they're not just depending on Cam Ward. There's a lot of teams that are dependent on their quarterbacks. So I think that and it's not a negative thing toward Cam Ward, but it's more of a positive thing for Miami. Like, hey, we can still get this done, kind of like Indiana did without Curtis Rourke. They could still got it done, and I think that's what separates good teams from great teams. Like throwing a sub and you're still good, because I feel like there's so many teams that just have that one star at that position, and then from that, the depth chart is a big gap there. So, again, for me, yeah, I personally have Cam Ward third in my top three.
I think if Cam Ward, Dylan Gabriel, and Ashton Jeanty aren't in everybody's top three right now, I would really love to entertain the conversation of who else they could have over these three guys. And kind of with that being said, I mean, Brian, I'm going to kick it back to you again real quick. What does Dylan Gabriel have to do? I mean, does he just have to stay consistent right now on this really good Oregon team?
I think he just has to stay the course. Obviously keep playing like he's playing. And I know it doesn't really necessarily seem like it should be this way, but I feel like the committee favors players that are playing on teams that are absolutely winning football games, are in contention for a national title, even though they may not be putting up the stats as others in the conversation are. Similar to this, I think obviously we see Cam Ward has much better stats than Dylan Gabriel, but Dylan Gabriel is probably right there with him, if not higher on the list than Cam Ward is right now. So I think he's got to keep playing like he's playing. If Oregon keeps dominating games, I think that's really all he has to do. And if Jeanty slips up a little bit, then I think he slides right to number one personally.
I think the way it sits right now, last I looked, I think the actual odds said I think it was Gabriel 1, Cam Ward 2, and Jeanty 3. And
that's crazy.
I'm actually the exact opposite of that, I believe. But
yep. I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been on 3. They had Jeanty 2, and then Gabriel and Ward tied for 3. So
really,
right there with us. Yep.
Okay.
But they're big Travis Hunter people, so they had Travis Hunter at 1. So take that for what it's worth.
Hey.
Oh, God, don't get Dave started. Dave, I'm not even going to entertain that conversation right now, so don't even go down that avenue again. I mean, so I'm going to take Ashton Jeanty here just a little bit for a minute, and then we can kind of move on because we don't want to spend too much time on this because I feel like we do a lot of the same conversation because it is seeming to be a lot of the same guys at this point. And Ashton Jeanty, I talked about it a second ago. Having 0 fumbles, to me, speaks volume because this guy is getting carry after carry after carry after carry. And it's impressive that he has not put the ball on the turf one time. He does truly not cost this team in any bad situation. Like he never puts his team in a bad situation, man. I mean, he is the guy. He is a guy. The way I look at it for Heisman, and let me make a case for this. If Cam Ward is off of Miami, I think Miami is probably still a good football team. I don't think they are undefeated bound like I think they are right now, but I think they would be a serviceable team because they're loaded around him. If you take Dylan Gabriel off of Oregon, do I think they're 12-0 bound like they are right now? Probably not. But do I think they're a 9-3 or 10-2 football team? Absolutely. I mean, they have a lot of talent around him. My point with this being, and I'll even talk about Travis Hunter for a second. You take Travis Hunter off Colorado, he didn't play a week ago or 2. I mean, he had very minimal snaps. If he even played at all, I don't remember at this point. And they still won the football game without him. So you remove Ashton Jeanty from Boise State, and Boise State is not in any of these conversations anymore. With the talent that's on Boise State, you remove Ashton Jeanty from that offense, and they are, I don't know, 7-5 at best, probably, because Maddox Matson proved to me that he cannot throw the football and throw them to a victory. It has to come from Ashton Jeanty's legs and Maddox Matson's legs secondary. And that's my case for Ashton Jeanty, besides the stats at this point, because they're ridiculous. You know, we can bring up Army's quarterback into this conversation at this point. I think he's a guy that we should probably set our eyes on outside of this top 3, and he could probably be our honorable mention. And to Dave's credit, he's been all over Travis Hunter all season. I think Travis Hunter truly is a honorable mention at this point. So I just wanted to prove that I think if Ashton Jeanty is off Boise State's never in conversation this year for anything.
No, I agree, Colin. And that's why I call it Ashton Jeanty University. Nobody knows about Boise State. Everybody knows about Ashton Jeanty. It's just facts, straight facts. But I agree, Colin. I don't think I'll be the first one to say it. I don't think Travis Hunter is in the top 3, and I don't think he'll get above a 3 this year unless everybody just gets hurt. But I do think is one of those names that you kind of just float around there. I mean, right now he leads the Big 12 in receptions with 60, receiving touchdowns with 8, and then pass breakups with 7. I mean, he's getting the job done, but I don't think those are Heisman numbers. Jeanty, those are absolutely Heisman numbers. There's just no way around it. I don't know how anybody doesn't have him at number 1. I think it's because everyone's just so high on quarterbacks versus a running back for this award.
That's it. That's all it is right there, Dave. That's all it is.
I don't understand why it matters. Like, this should be the best player in the country. Like, dude, I mean, if you have a center that's just amazing at what he does,
well, pump the brakes, Turbo.
You imagine the day we see a center win the Heisman Trophy?
Won't. Never will.
We won't, Dave. We won't. We're fighting to have a running back win it. So
exactly.
Save the Tyler Warren playing tight end and center conversation.
Hey,
for later.
It's 2020.
Go ahead, Bryant.
We got to have equal to cross.
To add to the Jeanty talk, though, I don't know why. I still get the feeling, though, that he has to keep putting up massive numbers to still be at the top of this list, even though all the conversation we just had is totally legit and probably correct with the fact that if Boise State did not have him, they would not be where they're at. I still think he has to put up north of 100 points and 100 yards and 1 or multiple touchdowns a game to stay up there, personally, even though that may be the right thing.
I think you were really, really accurate and spot on last week when you talked about, I think it was last week, when you talked about how he has to approach 2,500 yards and approach, I don't remember, said 30 touchdowns. I mean, and I think that looms correct still. I mean, we see him have his worst game of the season and now his odds are kind of slipping out of the majority favorite vote, which is crazy. I mean, so this really solidifies your point, in my opinion.
It's definitely crazy because we raved on Giddens for K-State, and he only had 102 yards, and we're like he was an X factor in that game, and then we're like, Jeanty only had 130. You know what I mean? It's a weird conversation to have, but I think it's valid.
Yes, 100%. So Dave, hey, dive us into this top 25 because I mean, you and I know for certain are going to argue over this Penn State situation. So
hey,
you tried getting me fired up today twice already over Penn State. Actually, 3 times.
Hey, let's go 25-1. So we save the best for last. we just kind of looked at it a little bit. It's relatively different from the AP top 25 in that right off the bat we don't have Missouri at number 25. We got University of Memphis. They're 7-1. They're a pretty solid program, but they're still, they're not playing the team that everybody else is. So, hey, we're giving them credit. So they're at number 25 for that reason. Then we got Washington State at number 24, Illinois at 23. They just lost over the weekend. Ole Miss at 22, LSU at 21. Yes, they did lose, but hey, it's a good loss, man. I mean, you can't hurt them that bad. And number 20, Colorado. Boom. Colin believes in the Buffs now. And we've talked about it, hey, if we're wrong, we're going to let you guys know, and we're going to correct ourselves. Like, we're not going to sit here and write on something that truly we don't believe in just for the hype. We're going to tell you what it is, how it is, and that's what sets us apart from all the other sports networks is that, hey, we're just genuine people out here. At number 19, we've got SMU. Hey, they knocked off Duke on a pretty competitive game. ACC's on the rise. Another team that's on the rise is 18, Army. Army at number 18, 9 weeks in, that's pretty darn impressive. The another team that's pretty impressive is Pitt at number 17, 16, Boise State, Ashton Jeanty University, number 15, University of Alabama had a heck of a weekend, number 14, Notre Dame, 13, Kansas State, 12, Clemson, 11, Iowa State, and then we get into the real good stuff. We get into number 10, Tennessee. They're still firing pretty good. Number 9, Texas A&M. They're firing on all cylinders from Marcel Reed at the helm there. Number 18, Indiana. It don't matter who's at the quarterback position. They're going to get it done. And then Ohio State, hey, they're getting it done. It's not pretty, but they're getting it done. So that's why they're at number 7. Texas, hey, they're still trying to figure it out. But hey, they're winning games. They've only got one loss. They knocked out Vanderbilt over the weekend on a game that could have gone either way. But hey, they got it. Number 5, BYU. Probably one of the shockers for most people. If you would have asked them at the beginning of the year that they were going to be a top 5 team, you wouldn't have thought it. But here they are, BYU, haven't lost a game, and they're rolling. Number 4, Miami. Miami's also rolling. Cam Moore's got it figured out. Miami's just a good program. Mario Cristobal can recruit. Hey, it's all working for him. And then number 3, we've got the University of Georgia. I'm going to argue that Georgia should be number 2. But hey, that's a topic for another time. But yeah, Georgia at number 3. We got Penn State at number 2. And then the obvious one, number 1, Oregon.
No, Dave. No. This Penn State Georgia conversation is not for another time. You are going to tell me right now why you think Georgia should be over Penn State.
I mean, it's pretty obvious for me, Colin. I mean, who has Penn State played at as a competitive program? And
Illinois.
What loss does Georgia have? What is Georgia's loss?
Bryant, take this over. Take this over.
Let's say Georgia probably should have lost to Kentucky, who it turns out is not very good.
But
barely
better than a 3-4 USC.
They lost to Alabama. They've had multiple close games. Penn State has just been, blowing the brakes off of them. Everybody they're playing, and they got, like we mentioned earlier, one of the best defenses in the country. So, yeah, we may be splitting hairs there, but I think Penn State is definitely number 2 over Georgia.
And Dave, we reward the undefeated teams, and Penn State is.
No, I agree. I'm just saying that when we get to the end of college football playoffs, or by the time we get to the playoffs, it is not going to be Penn State at the top 5. They might be 5 to 10.
Dave, are you forgetting that Georgia let Mississippi State score 31 points? Georgia let Mississippi State score 31 points against them. They were like 25.5-point favorites, and they won that game by 10.
Yeah, but
to a backup quarterback.
Penn
State just won with their backup quarterback.
Dave,
I'm disgusted in you, Dave.
Dave, what do you think about Texas?
Texas?
Yeah. What are your thoughts on them?
Honestly, me with Texas, I don't know that I'm as high on them as I thought originally. I mean, a lot has kind of like slowly kind of disintegrated over at Texas.
All right. So if Georgia was better than Penn State, Georgia should have beat the absolute brakes off of Texas 2 weeks ago. And yeah, they did win by 15, but it was not a very good showing on the offensive side of the ball in that game.
They won by 2 scores, Brian. What do you mean?
I'm just saying. You just proved your own point there, buddy.
Yeah. Hey, you walked into that one, Dave. You walked into that one. Hey, I tell you what. When
should we make a side bet?
What? I was gonna make a really unthought out statement about how next week we'll resume the Penn State Georgia combo, but Penn State does play Ohio State this weekend. So I mean, Dave,
we're gonna find out.
We're going to have our answers this coming weekend on if Penn State is truly the number 2. Okay, and let me ask you this, Dave. When Penn State does beat Ohio State, because I don't want to throw you guys on this because I don't want you guys to sync with me because I think Ohio State probably does win now. But if Penn State does win, and I've been trying to get you, Dave, especially bought into the fact that Penn State can win that football game for 8, 9, 10, 12 weeks now, what's going to be your excuse next week if Penn State wins?
Listen, if Penn State can knock out Ohio State, I think they're a top 4 program. Now, I don't think
top 4. Good God! So what do they have to do?
They're even Ohio State. They're number 7, but I don't know. There's some inconsistencies at Ohio State, man.
Who do they need to beat?
Dude, beat a top 5 program.
They can't help their schedule.
Hey, you make your own schedules. Your athletic department makes your own schedule.
These players don't have any control. But these players have no control over their schedules.
Yes,
and they are winning the games that they are needing to win.
If you're
who has Georgia beat, and that's a top 5 team?
Listen, I'm just saying that Georgia. Listen, Georgia by the end of the year is going to have a lot better wins than Penn State, and that's a guarantee.
How?
What do you mean how? Because they actually play competitive football games. And listen,
Penn State.
To your point, when you go to Alabama doesn't throw a shitty schedule on you.
Is Greg Sankey your cousin? I love the SEC, and I don't. Brian said he's had enough. I love the SEC, and I don't even ride them as hard as you're riding Georgia. I think. Listen, and Brian is right. Brian is right. We are splitting hairs. We really are, because both these teams are top three. The fact that you think Penn State's not a top four, and if they beat Ohio State, they're only a top four, is crazy to me. If Penn State beats Ohio State this weekend, I will be on this show making a case that Penn State is number one over Oregon. So be prepared. Be prepared
Hey,
that I will
really
make
prepared for
a
that.
true fight that Penn State is better than Oregon. So
You can
we're
make it
going to
depending on what
lay,
the score is.
yes, and we're going to lay to rest the 1-2-3 conversation and move on, because I also could make a case right now that we could talk about Miami and BYU sliding into this top three, because we want to reward undefeated teams. And that is my biggest argument as well for Penn State. So, to put my own foot in my mouth a little bit, I could really make a case that Miami and BYU should be above Georgia. I really do. I think if you are winning the games on your schedule, I don't care who they are. If that's the case, we need to not talk about Boise State anymore, because their games on their schedule are kind of irrelevant. But we have talked before, they cannot help games on their schedule. They play those games, and they need to win those games, and that's what all these teams are doing. And you look down here at Colorado. I want to talk about them a minute, because I never give Colorado credit. Colorado hit the over 5.5 wins on their win total by October. So, I mean, Colorado is deserving of being a top 25 football team. I mean, I love our top 25 through and through. I really do. I think we are rewarding the right teams. I think anybody out there that wants to make a case for us to move Pitt up, I think they could do that as well. Pitt is proving to be better than what I thought they were. I don't think they did anything offensively that was spectacular against Syracuse this week. I mean, their defense, if I remember correctly, may have outscored their offense in that football game, because Kyle McCord had 3 pick sixes. So, I mean, congratulations to Pitt, though. You're undefeated.
Yeah, not to spoil, this coming week, but we're going to find a lot this coming week. Penn State are playing Ohio State, and Pitt's playing SMU. So there's
Those
going to be
awesome games.
Going to be a and find out week for some of these teams.
Yep, absolutely. And I think I read earlier today that Curtis Work is trying to get back for Indiana this weekend against Michigan State. I'll throw this out there. I think if I am Kurt Signetti and Indiana, I'm probably not playing Curtis Work this week. I don't think Michigan State's a real threat for them. I think their backup looked plenty fine, and their defense is plenty good to slow down Michigan State and Aiden Childs, because they're not that great. So I personally would give Curtis Work another week of rest and let him be ready for the remaining games down the stretch, because I think they have Ohio State, and I think one of the next 2 or 3 weeks. And I would make sure he's ready for that game more so than the Michigan State game.
Hey, I think why we're having such discussion with this top 5 is because in past years you had in 1, 2, and 3, and that was that. Like, they were set in stone. There hasn't been so much crazy stuff happening in college football. And why it's so competitive, I mean, you could, like you said, Colin, you can make an argument for Pitt. You really could. You can make an argument for Miami. You can make an argument for BYU that they should be above a Georgia.
Like, you can make an argument for Iowa State.
Absolutely. I mean, look at how many teams we've got performing really well up until this point. But hey, that's what we give you.
I want to throw this out there before we move on. I think, looking at our top 25, I think the top 19 teams are truly legit. In my opinion, I think we could narrow this down to a top 19 list and find your best teams. And I think maybe even get it narrowed down to a top 15 and start to trend. And maybe that's what we do moving forward. Let's maybe cut this thing down for fun and trend in the direction of our top 12 for the playoffs at the end of the year, and maybe have a little bit of fun with that and bring up a little more conversation.
Well, I say we do a top 15. That way you'd still leave those couple 3 teams that are kind of still on that edge right there, because we're looking at that 12 seed, that group that, that number 12 seed, I think is going to be very competitive up until the end,
let's. Are you good with that, Bryant? Let's have some fun with that, and maybe we cut this down to a top 15 list moving forward.
I mean, let's just think of off of this list. I could probably for sure 3 teams that could be that number 12. Yeah, Boise State.
Absolutely.
Iowa State probably. I mean, and then once we get towards the end, we can start shaving. As we get closer, we shave a team off. We just knock it off.
Definitely. I mean, I kind of like having the top 25, and then you can kind of talk about maybe more in depth some of these lower teams that could have that spot to be there. Because I think there's obviously more than 3 teams that are going to be in that conversation. But I mean, it would be a good little mix up.
Yeah, and to your point, Brian, let's welcome in Washington State and Memphis to our top 25. What really sucks for us too is, like we've talked about before, we can't get our episodes out before top 25 or AP top 25 drops, and we actually just looked for the first time after we released our own amongst each other, and they also had Washington State getting in the mix. So I thought we were going to be the first ones to get after that, and we weren't. But Washington State, well deserving of getting in this top 25 at this point. And Memphis, man, Memphis has only losses to Navy. I know Navy got curb stomped this weekend by Notre Dame, but I think Navy really dug a hole that their offense is not built to get out of, and I think that's what really screwed them in this football game. They definitely had a chance early on to make it competitive and hang around, and they just dug that hole and couldn't get out of it. But also, fellas, I don't really have any other teams really to talk about too much. I think when we upload this list on our show, I think it kind of speaks for itself. And I think most of these teams are kind of hanging around the same areas. I think the real discussion every week is probably more so in the top 4, top 5-ish, and honestly in the 20 through 25 range. I think the middle of the pack is pretty consistent. I think you could make a case, like Dave even mentioned a second ago, for any team from 12 to 19. I think you could interchange any of those teams at any spot and really make a case for why they're there.
Absolutely. I mean, Alabama can move up personally. You never know. So there's a lot of teams left to prove with, only a few more games left on everybody's schedule. So it's going to be a fun last month of this season.
Hey, let's hope it keeps on rock and rolling. We've had an insane year of college football, which has made our job that much easier because there's just so much to talk about. If anything, we have to figure out what we're not going to talk about.
Oh yeah, it's maybe made on the flip side of that, to your point, it's maybe made it harder, but it's gave us way more content to talk about because it's been so damn awesome. But yeah, fellas, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. If either one of you guys got anything to add, let her rip real quick, and then I'll take us out of here.
I got one thing. If there's anybody out there that can play a backup quarterback for a university that's relatively in the middle of the United States, their team colors is black and gold. So hit me up on DMs if you know anybody. Thanks.
Hey, we are open applications, and I'm with you, Bryant. I will field those as well. I will host tryouts in my backyard if I have to. Hell, I may try to start throwing the football around a little bit and see if I got anything in the tank. But yeah, fellas, this has been tons of fun once again. Love doing this. Like Dave talked about earlier in the episode, make sure you're paying attention. We do only have 2 episodes this week. We don't want to get anything too stale on you guys, so we're going to kind of mix it up here and there. Next week, we're going to be back at 3 episodes, do some more conference and playoff conversation on the back half of that episode number 2. And just tons of fun, man. Just keep liking, subscribing, showing support. Leave us some comments. Like we said before, tell us what you like, don't like. Also, the tumblers have been delayed a little bit with some shipping mix-up, but hey, those are coming, and I promise you we will get those out, and we will let you guys know how to enter to get those. But from this point forward, hey, follow our socials. You can find us on X at DT_sports_. Instagram, Deep Threat Sports with a Z. Facebook, Deep Threat Sports Network. TikTok, Deep Threat Sports Network. YouTube at Deep Threat Sports. Spotify, Deep Threat Sports. Fellas, this has been tons of fun. We'll see you all later in the week again to do our game previews of this coming week, our big games that we cannot wait to watch. We kind of talked about a little bit of some of them a little bit here at the end of this episode. Those are going to be absolute certified bangers. Make sure you got a free weekend. If your wife tells you have a wedding or anything like that, put it on the back burner. You know what I'm talking about, Bryant. Make sure we're putting some of these things on the back burner. We got some real good college football instead. But hey, fellas, until next time, peace.